So around last year, I started playing a lot more fighting games, whether it's because curiosity got the best of me or because my friend brought his computer to class and we started playing Street Fighter or Tekken. The fighting game genre slowly but surely became one that I wasn't necessarily a big fan of, but respected either way, to a genre that's up there now as one of my favorites. But even though I've played tons of traditional fighting games before, its sister subgenre, the platform fighter genre, is the one I personally prefer. And when it comes to platform fighters, the first game that comes to everyone's head is Super Smash Bros., and there's a clear reason why. At the time, Smash Bros. 64 was unlike any fighting game scene at the time, and it practically pioneered the genre. And just as people thought it was going to be a one-hit wonder, bam! 2 years later, and Nintendo released Smash Bros. Melee, one of, if not the most played and competitive fighting game ever made. And from there, it managed to become larger and larger, basically becoming a household name for not only Nintendo, but gaming itself. However, at this point, everybody knows what Smash Bros. Is. What about the other games that appear in this subgenre? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about today. I'll be talking about a resounding 12 platform fighters who decided to take a stab at the formula and see how each of them stand out. To some old ones, to some new ones, to some popular ones, to the lesser known ones. And with the current resurgence of platform fighters recently, I felt like this was as good a time as any. Now, it is pretty obvious that I won't be talking about every non-Smash Bros. Related platform fighter in this video, so if any of you in the comments go,
"But Manuel, you forgot to talk about my favorite platform fighters like Shovel Knight Showdown and Slap City,"
just know that either A, I haven't played them, or B, I don't want to make this video too overcrowded. And this is coming from the same guy who talked about every Crash Bandicoot game in one video. So with that said, let's not waste enough time, because I know for a fact this video is going to be long, and talk about the most relevant game to start off this video with. That's right, I'm talking about... Up first, we got one of the first notable platform fighters considered a Smash Brothers clone. God, I hate saying that. Released in 2011 and developed by Papaya Studios and Crave Games, Cartoon Network Punch Time Explosion was meant to be the epic crossover game between all of the Cartoon Network shows at the time and have them duke it out. You might be wondering what the XL in the name stands for, and it's actually very simple. The original game first came out in the 3DS, and less than a year later, they dropped the game again, but for the Wii, Xbox, and PlayStation with new stuff like new playable characters, assists, stages, a visual and story overhaul, and other improvements from its 3DS counterpart. Now, while I may not talk about it as much, I watched a ton of Cartoon Network back in the day, but even then I didn't know about this game's existence, but something tells me if I did, I would have probably had an unhealthy obsession with it. But after a whopping 12 years later, let's check this game out and see if I was missing out by not playing it. Right off the bat, the roster of this game is surprisingly not half bad. The majority of the roster is based on well-known classic characters like the Powerpuff Girls, Flapjack, and Samurai Jack, while having a few characters from shows that aired at the time like Ultimate Alien Force Ben 10. Although probably my favorite thing about this roster is the amount of curveball characters, like dog, name another game where you can play as the Toilinator from Kids Next Door or as Captain Planet. Not many come to mind, unfortunately. My only complaint with the roster is the lack of newer cartoons represented, especially cartoons like Adventure Time and Regular Show that could have fit perfectly here, since they sparked in popularity among the masses around this time. But thankfully, they'll get their time to shine in a platform fighter soon enough. And by soon enough, I mean 12 years later. Visually, this game holds up as well as you expect. Not the best. The character models definitely show their age, especially whose designs don't really translate well into 3D like the foster home characters, but at the same time, some character models actually don't look half bad. Like, I was genuinely surprised that the Samurai Jack characters don't look uncanny as hell. And in terms of the stages, they're actually creative for what they are, although something I really like is that there are 2 or even 3 different stages for each series represented in the game, and all of which manage to be both distinct in their design and atmosphere. But unfortunately, the music track that accompany these stages aren't as good. When it comes to the gameplay Punch Time Explosion, you basically get what you expect in any other platform fighter. You have light attacks, special attacks, and grabs. There's also items, with the exception being the assist box, where a character comes in and helps you out in battle. It's a really neat idea that emphasizes its crossover concept. And like I mentioned before, the game includes a finishing move after collecting a good amount of blocks, and the moves are fine, they aren't anything special, they do what they're supposed to, and they stay consistent with the character. My only problem with the gameplay, however, is literally everything else. More specifically, how unbalanced each character is. They're either way too overpowered, like with Blossom and Aku, both having attacks that can quickly cancel and immobilize their opponents, or they're way too weak, like with Chowder or Flapjack. At least they somewhat have a good recovery, but that's the only saving grace for them. Surprisingly enough, this game has a lot of game modes to choose from, which most of them are a variation of a free-for-all, which are either getting the most cubes, killing the most amount of enemies, getting the more points, etc. But also has an arcade mode that includes a story for each character, with an introduction introduction and an ending, which I would give credit to, but I'm gonna be honest, this mode kinda sucks. If anything, I describe it how video game reviewers would describe the arcade mode in PlayStation All-Stars, and don't worry, we'll get to that soon enough. Oh yeah, this game also has a full-blown story mode, narrated by Space Ghost, telling us the story about an evil force who decided to take over the world of these iconic characters, and now they must team up and take down their own villains who also decided to team up to take this greater force down. And I just realized that I was describing the plot of Subspace Emissary from Brawl. Wait, what do you mean I wasn't? Though to this game's credit, I do have to admit that it actually does a better job at its crossover aspect by actually bringing these rolled-in characters together instead of just having the characters interact in random-ass places. Oh yeah, it also has different game styles, which I kind of don't remember, other than the fact that it has an Angry Birds clone at one time. But other than those game modes, the story mode is honestly really mediocre at best. So yeah, that's all I have to say about this game. Oh yeah, I forgot, this is a Manual D project where I review more than one thing, so of course there's going to be more people joining in.
While there have been platform fighters before Smash, I think it is very obvious that Smash popularized the genre. There were a couple other attempts at copying Smash's formula like Digimon and Jump among others, but Punch Time Explosion was the first one I had heard mentioned in casual conversations with people. I happen to be one of the lucky people who had this when it came out and recently revisited it for this video. Punch Time Explosion came out in 2012, and while Regular Show and Adventure Time did come out in 2010, they were modern upcoming shows at the time that didn't make it into the game. The show was missing quite a few modern shows. Instead, the roster focused on classic Cartoon Network shows like Ben 10, Billy and Mandy, Powerpuff Girls, and even Captain Planet. The game itself does feel like it had a pretty small budget to work with, and I went and looked into the company Papaya Studio and saw that they basically made the type of games you expected them to make. Not that they were all bad, or any indication of the quality, but clearly budget titles from a smaller studio in an era when show and movie tie-in games were still very popular. I remember having some dumb fun playing Punch Time Explosion with friends and going through the story. Almost every character felt like they had a spammable infinite, like Blossom's Ice Breath just felt like you could just do it over and over again with no penalties. And it really allowed you to cheese battles if you wanted to. This made the story mode, when playing on the hard difficulty, a little more bearable due to the polish of the game. The story itself is basically what you would imagine. The cast of various shows are pulled into different worlds with one another, and you fight various villains throughout like Kevin Levin, Sticky Beard, and leading you down the path to the real villain, a remote control that has become sentient. If I remember correctly, they even tease Space Ghost at the end after the announcer gets upset that he has to change the channel himself and won't be able to watch every show at one time. The story has various game genres mixed in too. It had an on-rail shooter, bullet hell, there was a part where you were running a Samurai Jack to escape lava, but most of the story really focused on normal platform scaling that you would kind of expect from that genre. It had extended levels for the story that you would kind of run through and fight basic enemies, but it was very enjoyable overall. Seeing the characters interact with one another was a blast, and I enjoyed it. The final villain felt right for a game about mixing together various franchises. Instead of using a known villain from one of those franchises and making them seem more important than the others, you kind of really have to go with a villain you created yourself for something like this.
Overall, Punch Time Explosion is just okay. There are things this game does incredibly well, especially how it handles its crossovers, but that's just it. This game has tons of charm, but when it comes to the actual gameplay, it falls pretty flat. Do I think this game is bad? Not really, but when looking at other platform fighters to play, this one is a decent distraction, but there are way better options out there. Like our next game. Damn, we are really heading from 0 to 100, aren't we? Rivals of Aether is an indie platform fighter released in 2017 by Dan Fortins, and to say that it popped off is a real understatement, being one of the most critically acclaimed non-Smash Bros. Platform fighters out there. But does it really deserve the amount of praise it's given? Spoiler alert, it does. Starting off, what already makes Rivals of Aether stand out from many platform fighters is that the roster is mainly made up of original characters for this game. And while most of the games that have original characters like these don't work out that well, surprisingly enough, this game manages to pull it off very well thanks to the amount of creativity within each character. We have a fire lion wrestler, a poisonous blue frog that does martial arts, a warrior polar bear, and that's just scratching the surface. Not only are their designs really unique, but they also have full-blown backstories to them, which is pretty crazy. But outside of them, we also have two guest fighters, including Ori from Ori and the Blind Forest, and my personal favorite indie character, Shovel Knight. There's also one key thing that makes the roster unique, but we'll talk about that in a bit. Gameplay-wise, the developer of this game stated that they wanted to make this game like Smash Bros, but faster with more unique combo opportunities, and that's exactly what it is. The moveset of each character is very unique, with no character feeling the same to one another. Even their respective stages manage to be as unique as the character in a visual standpoint, though design-wise the stages are mostly the same. Speaking of mostly the same, the game plays like a lot of platform fighters, but what I do appreciate about Rivals is the fact it's actually a lot lot more competitive than casual. Like I said in the start of the video, at the time I got Rivals, I wasn't really into fighting games, so I wasn't expecting to like Rivals for this exact reason, but surprisingly enough, it ended up being the exact reason why I loved it. The fast-paced movement, attacks, parrying, and other mechanics were absolute hell to get the hang of, but it never felt unfair. More than anything, it gave me motivation to get better at the game, and even try new characters to see which one fit my playstyle better. I touched upon it a second ago, but damn, I absolutely love the way Rivals of Aether looks and sounds. Each character has a black outline with simplistic looking 8-bit designs that look pleasing to look at, but the star of the show are the stages and how breathtaking they look, going for a more complex style that visually tells the player the type of character that inhabits this world. Same with the music tracks, which are honestly really good. And although I did say this game is more competitive, that doesn't mean that it completely alienates its casual players, though unfortunately that's where the biggest issue of this game lie. Though I'm not saying that these extra modes are terrible, they are definitely lackluster. There's a story mode which is pretty forgettable and boring with a really mid-final boss at the end. There's a horde mode that's pretty fun but gets pretty repetitive after a while, and there's a tetherball mode which is pretty harmless, but have you really met anyone that plays this game and says, "Hey, let's go play the tetherball mode, it's my favorite"? Yeah, I didn't think so. However, the one thing that makes this game very special, it's the workshop. For those who don't know, the workshop is a place where you can download and play as characters and stages made by other people. And it's such a bizarre but amazing experience at the same time to see what type of stuff people can make. Like, come on, whether a game where you can play as a Mori fighting a JoJo-style Ronald McDonald on Bob-omb Battlefield from Mario 64. Yeah, not many games. Overall, I have to say that Rivals of Aether is a really fun game. It has its issues when you want to play casually, but for the most part, it's a game that I see myself playing a lot in the future, and with its sequel coming out soon, let's hope that it takes the foundation of this game and makes something even better. Huh. You started off kind of slow with Punch Time Explosion, but from the looks of things, I think we're gonna be just fine. Hopefully it gets better from here. I said things were gonna get better, not worse. So as a guy who sometimes touches upon animation in this channel, I love the Kung Fu Panda movies. They're my favorite series of movies made by DreamWorks. That spot goes directly to Madagascar and Shrek. But Kung Fu Panda is such a great series that I find myself rewatching sometimes, and out of every platform fighter I'm talking about today, this honestly makes the most sense to make a fighting game out of. Kung Fu is literally in the name of the series, for Christ's sake. But when I found out about this game, I was intrigued to see if this game was gonna end up being good or not. However, I later remembered that this is a rushed out license game from 2015. This is gonna suck, isn't it? Well, okay, let's just get this over with. Starting off with the roster, and yep, it's as good as a Kung Fu Panda fighting game is gonna get. We got obvious picks like Po, 3 out of the Fury's 5 members, 2 out of the 3 villains, and recurring characters which for some reason include Master Bear, Master Boar, and Master Chicken, who are so forgettable I thought they were made up for this game, but no, they appear in the movies, but they have minor cameos. Also, Baby Po is in the main roster, but characters like Po's dad and Kai, you know, one of the more notable new additions in Kung Fu Panda 3, are just relegated to being DLC. Something tells me that they and other DLC characters, which include variations of already existing characters, were supposed to be added in the main roster but got turned into DLC because of either time constraints or they just wanted to make money. And judging how much DLC it got outside of just the characters, something tells me it might be a combination of the both. Graphically, I'm split about how this game looks. On one hand, for a licensed game like this, the stages look really pretty. You can tell that they're trying to replicate the style of the movies, and while they may not be that impressive, they are pretty to look at. Can't say the same about the character models, though. Listen, I don't want to do the typical video game reviewer thing and insult this game by saying it has PS2 looking models, but they look unfinished at times. As for the gameplay, I really hate to say this, but this game does absolutely nothing to differentiate itself from other platform fighters. It is quite literally a word-for-word, bar-for-bar copy of Super Smash Bros., and it honestly isn't afraid about it either. Okay, maybe I was being a bit exaggerated. It does have some changes, but they are very minimal. For example, instead of having the usual health system that most games have, where the more you hurt, the more knockback you get, but this game does the opposite, where you start at 100 and it goes down to 0. But it doesn't do anything special with this concept, which is unfortunate. Other than those differences, it doesn't do anything else different than Smash, and even the things it does do like Smash aren't the best. Simply put, this game lacks a lot of polish, making the movement feel awkward, stiff, and overall not fun to play at all. Hell, even the finishing blows that these characters have don't feel impactful as they should. So if the gameplay is bad, that means that the rest of the other modes are as well, right? No, not really. That's because there aren't any extra modes. Okay, I was lying, there was a tournament mode, but it's so bad that it has no ending or an achievement for you to playing it. Like, what was the point of this? This feels like an afterthought, and I can't really say anything about the online mode because, you know, it doesn't work. And yeah, that's about it. This game sucks. There were some alright things about it, but overall, I did not enjoy my time with this game at all, and I don't think it's really worth your time. Anyway, now I could go back to the forgotten void where it once came from. So, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, am I right? You either love them, hate them, or haven't watched enough content around them to make a specific opinion about them. Guess which category I'm in. But I have seen Rise of the TMNT and played Shredder's Revenge with my friends, and I enjoyed it quite a bit. But outside of that, I had no expectations going forward with this game, and after playing it, not gonna lie, this game kinda sucks. But let's not get ahead of ourselves so quickly. TMNT Smash Up was released in 2007, was published by Ubisoft as a tie-in game to the TMNT movie that released the same year. Hell, it was even developed by people who later worked on Smash Bros. Brawl, which could give this game some more credibility to being good, but I already said that I didn't like it. So let's talk about why this game sucks. Starting off with the roster, and I get that it's a tie-in movie game, so of course it has only the characters from the movie, but that's no excuse for this roster to be really bare bones. We got the 4 Ninja Turtles, April, Casey Jones, Master Splinter, a Foot Clan member, Shredder, Karai, the Krang, and that's about it. Unless you want to count the 4 additional Rabbids characters and everyone's favorite TMNT character, Night Watcher. So to put into perspective, this game has a whopping 16 characters in its roster. Taking out the Rabbids, we have 12 TMNT characters, which is basically the same character count as Smash Bros. 64. And considering the amount of character potential the TMNT fighting game has, this is just barely scratching the surface. And the comparisons to the 2007 movie don't stop there, because the visuals take a clear inspiration from the movie, and they don't look good, like, at all. And I can't even say that it looks good at times. That goes for both the character models and the stages. They look so lifeless and devoid of color, which makes it very dull to look at. There are the exceptions, like the occasional stage transitions, but that's about it. Same goes for the music. It just sounds so boring that I forget it's there half of the matches. Speaking of which, have you ever heard of the criticism of a game feel like it's supposed to be a part of a completely different genre of the game you're playing? You probably haven't, but that's my exact thoughts when playing this game. Simply put, it feels more like a traditional fighting game instead of a platform fighter. The movements feel so stiff and tight to control, which would be a good thing, but surprisingly enough, this game actually focuses a lot more on its platforming, and it really doesn't help that the jumps are very floaty and stupidly hard to control at times. Combat is about what you expect. Light attacks, heavy attacks, dodging, etc. But every time you have a good amount of hits on your opponent, they get stunned and they don't move for however long the player moves the controller fast enough, and for me that kind of kills the tension of the fight. There's also a grab mechanic that makes this game stupidly easy to beat against any computer players. That said, I've been pretty negative about this game so far, but it does have some positives. There aren't much, but that's besides the point. For one, I really dig the stages in this game, especially at times when it transitions in the middle of a fight. That's something really cool. There's additional mini games that are pretty neat. They focus on the stiff platforming, but at least it's something. I like the comic book art style and the game's story mode cutscenes. The story was really bad, but you know, at least they tried. And, yeah, that's about it. Overall, like, what is there even left to say about this game? It low-key just kind of sucks. If you're looking for a better TMNT fighting game experience, I recommend playing either Shredder's Revenge or the original 2D TMNT fighting games from the 90s. They aren't platform fighters, but it's the best that we could do at the moment. I'm gonna be completely honest here, I was not looking forward to playing Brawlhalla at all. I don't know, just looking at the game, it just looked very unfun to play, and I had little to no interest in playing it. In fact, I was actually planning to cut it out of the original version of this video. But considering how impactful this game was in the grand scheme of the platform fighter genre, it's kinda hard to just skim over this game like it never existed. So here we are, Brawlhalla. It came out in 2015, and since then became one of the most popular platform fighters outside of Smash Bros. So with that said, it's been over 8 years since this game first got released, so let's see if I was treating it too harshly. When it comes to the roster, saying that Brawlhalla's roster is stacked is more than an understatement, but surprisingly enough, it has a nice balance with its original characters to its crossover characters. And speaking of crossover characters, goddamn, we got a pretty long list to go over, ranging from our favorite Shovel Boy and his Rogues Gallery, to more iconic Cartoon Network characters like Adventure Time and Ben 10, to even some weird collabs like The Walking Dead and WWE. They even brought back Rayman and his friends for this game. Like, when was the last time you seen a playable Rayman in the game? Well, let's be honest here, outside of Rayman, since when the fuck have you cared about Mario and Rabbit? But although the crossover characters are pretty cool, let's not forget the original IP characters for this game, since design-wise they look pretty cool. And even some have their own lore, which isn't really that relevant in this game, but it's whatever. Visually, this game is a spectacle. Just the right balance of looking cartoony, but at the same time looking simplistic and detailed. And I'm not just talking about the backgrounds. The platforms themselves also look really beautiful to look at. As for the character designs, that's what I'm mainly split on, because on one hand, they look fine for a what they are, they aren't really that ugly per se. But on the other hand, it seems like every character fits under a similar model, which makes some of the characters, especially a lot of the crossover ones, look really uncanny and weird. Gameplay wise, this game does something pretty unique, and that's the way it utilizes items in combat. I haven't talked much about items so far in this video, and that's because I really don't care if they appear in a platform fighter or not, but it's almost necessary for you to pick up an item in Brawlhalla to make sure you win. Sure, you can fight without an item, but the attacks don't necessarily hit that hard and will make you a target. That's where the weapons come into play. During battle, your little angel helper guy is gonna throw a glowing sword to the stage, and when you pick it up, depending on the character you choose, you will have access to only 2 weapons, ranging from battle gloves to dual pistols to a giant spear and many others. So let's say you get a giant spear and you don't particularly like the playstyle. Well, that's no issue, because with the press of a button, you can throw that weapon away for another one. This sounds complicated at first, but I love this idea. The idea of each character having 3 entire movesets is crazy, and although some characters have the same weapon, their attack differentiates depending on who you choose. But at the same time, it also makes it pretty hard for me to talk about the combat without praising a specific weapon while dunking on another one I didn't like. After all, it all matters to what combat style fits you.
Brawlhalla is to me one of the most fun platform fighting games I've ever played. At the time it came out, people called it a Smash Bros clone, which, come on, they always call platform fighting games Smash clones. But I feel confident in saying Brawlhalla has some pretty cool twists that make it work well as its own thing. In Brawlhalla, you always start with your bare fists, and as platform players will almost always try to do, they'll try to use their special, just to find out it doesn't really do anything special. But then this thing will fall out of the sky and oh look, entirely different moveset, and now you've got your own specials. But what's even more fun is that you can drop this weapon and pick up a secondary one, which will have its own moveset and its own specials. And that's something I really enjoy about this game. Every character technically has 3 movesets, with one being equal to everybody, but 2 of them being special to said character. I'm not gonna lie, when I first installed this game, I played this game a lot. It's a really fun game to play with friends in my opinion, and it's a game that is still played to this day by many people, and even has its own community here on YouTube. Not to mention how they still update and add characters and maps to the game, and sometimes even have collabs with other shows or media, like WWE or Adventure Time or Rayman. Like, come on dude, it's fucking Rayman. If you've never tried Brawlhalla, I really recommend you give it a shot. If you're into platform fighters, this one will be some of the most fun you'll ever have playing one.
Overall, I was pleasantly surprised with Brawlhalla. It's not particularly that great, but it was pretty okay. I'd say give this game a try if you're interested in playing it. So good job, Brawlhalla, you've proved me wrong by not being terrible. Here's a gold star sticker. Released in 2012 and created by Santa Monica Studios, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale, or just PlayStation All-Stars, is a game often brought up by people whenever they talk about companies' failed attempt to make another platform fighter. But honestly, even though this game has tons of issues, I'd say it's pretty overhated. While the playable roster is pretty questionable, each character is pretty fun and have a unique moveset that suits them. In terms of balancing, this could be set for better or for worse. While a lot of the character models don't look that great nowadays, the stages definitely do, with a great mix of having vibrant, colorful stages and dark and grim stages. And while its single-player story mode is pretty lackluster with a really bad boss fight against the Polygon Man, it's also one of the very few games that does an incredible job with its crossover concept. Like the stages having 2 franchises crossing over with each other in the middle of a match, and don't even get me started with the rival cutscenes, those were really cool. I guess what I'm trying to say is that while this game is heavily flawed, there were hints of an actual good game here, and the concept this game brings to the table are good, just that the good concepts need to be fleshed out more and other concepts just needed more time in the oven. I apologize if this segment is shorter than the rest, but I already made a video on this game a year ago. Even so, I felt like mentioning PlayStation All-Stars. So if you want to hear my extended thoughts about this game and the history behind it, the video will be linked in the description down below. But just to summarize, PlayStation All-Stars is objectively a pretty mediocre game, but it's a mediocre game I love playing. Now, while thinking about platform fighters to talk about in this video, I knew for a fact that Indie Pogo had to be in it, and I'm honestly surprised I haven't seen many people talk about this game. Indie Pogo originally started as a Kickstarter campaign in 2017, created by Lowbro Studios, promising a platform fighter that's easy to learn but difficult to master, as well as being a crossover between a lot of beloved indie game characters. The game released in 2018 with a lot of positive reception from critics and players alike. So with that said, let's not waste enough time because I'm really excited to talk about this game. Starting off with the roster, we got a good mix of both well-known indie game characters like Boltaro from Downwell, Bullet Kitten from Enter the Gungeon, Meat Boy from Super Meat Boy, and of course, If you guys couldn't tell, Shovel Knight really likes to appear in other indie games, as well as having some other more obscure indie game characters like Yolk from Leap Day, Velocispider, and even that one guy from Getting Over It, which that last one sounds really odd at first. Well, when you get into the gameplay, that's when it really starts to make sense. Actually, while on the topic of the gameplay, Indie Pogo has one of the most unique gimmicks in any other 2D platform fighter I'll be talking about today. And its main gimmick is pretty much in the name itself. When it comes to the game's combat, the characters automatically jump, which sounds like a complete nightmare at first, but it gets really easy when you get used to it, but it's quite difficult to master. The game encourages you to try as many aerial combos as you can, whether it's with normal attacks, special attacks, or just jumping on your enemy's head, and it's so challenging yet fun to chain up attacks like this. It also helps that each character has their own gimmick, which allows the player to try each character to see which one fits their playstyle. For example, to reflect his gameplay, Voltaro has multiple jumps, but you don't get as much momentum. Commander Video is one of the more faster characters, but you don't have much recovery. This just scratches the surface around each character's gimmick, and I have to really commend the dev team for putting this amount of effort into each character's source material. And it doesn't stop with just the characters themselves. The stages and visuals also share this love put into this game. I really love the art style of this game, and it's a mix between the art style of both Indie Pogo's own art style and the art style from the original indie game the character belongs to. And the stages are even better at this. Although they do lack in quantity, since not every character in the roster has their own stage, they definitely make up for it for having quality, since each stage has their own unique design, visually taking inspiration from the games they represent. Hell, even some indie games like Flappy Bird get their own stage, and that's just really cool. My only nitpick is that the music from these stages are rather hit or miss. As for the game modes, we have local battles, which work as well as you expect a local battle mode to play, online, which unfortunately I couldn't find a match, but from what I've heard, it's not too bad, and a lot of single player content, including your typical arcade mode with a boss at the end, the boss in question being the aforementioned Crow from the indie game Nefarious, and I have to give props because that alone is such an amazing idea. The entire plot of Nefarious centers around Crow traveling around different worlds and being the antagonist of said worlds, so this just makes a lot of sense, and Crow himself is surprisingly a really difficult boss. There's also a challenge mode for each character and a training mode, which both do their job just fine. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with Indie Pogo. It takes a concept that doesn't sound fun at all and makes it work in almost every way. While it may lack in some departments, it more than makes up for it by being a fun spin in the platform fighter genre. I highly recommend giving this game a try if you're interested, and for it to just be 15 bucks, it's definitely worth your time. After Indie Pogo in 2018, we will reach a drought when it came to non-Smash Bros. Platform fighters. Whether it's because Smash Ultimate came out or for an arbitrary second option, we aren't really sure. Another thing that was missing for a while was a non-Smash Bros. Platform fighter that contained mainstream IPs, and that's where this little game took the internet by storm. Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl was first revealed in July of 2021, and it managed to impress a lot of people. This was the first non-Smash Bros. Platform fighter we've seen in a while, and it showed a lot of promise. It was being developed by Ludosity, the team who made Slap City in 2018, the gameplay looked fun, it had rollback netcode, and this was a Nickelodeon fighting game, meaning that the possibilities for the roster could go hard as hell. Plus, Nickelodeon and Ludosity were promoting the ever-loving hell out of this game, and the fact that Smash Ultimate's DLC was coming to a close at the day of this game's release, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl was looking to be something very special. Then the game actually came out, and not only did a majority of people think it was just okay, but most of the player base dropped the game not even a month later. There are multiple factors towards why this happened, but I mostly like to think of it being a mix of both overhype and releasing an unfinished product too quickly. So you know I just mentioned that the game caught the traction of a lot of people. Yeah, I forgot to mention that half of those people overhyped the fuck out of this game ironically, mainly calling it the Smash Brothers killer. Hell, it got so bad that one of the lead developers of the game, Thaddeus Cruz, had to address this on Twitter. And as for the unfinished product point, well, you can legit look at any review of this game before 2022, and everyone will say the same thing. The game lacked polish from a visual and gameplay point of view, its rollback netcode was bad, and its lack of voice acting was very noticeable and jarring. Now it's 2023, we're done getting updates, and a sequel of this game got announced, which looks to be an improvement in every single way. So let's take a look at the first game and see if it still holds up. Starting off with the roster, we have a nice balance of some old Nickelodeon characters like Oblina from All Real Monsters, Ren and Stimpy, and Rocco, some Nickelodeon characters from the mid-2000s like Jenny from My Life as Teenage Robot, Danny Phantom and Hugh Neutron from Jimmy Neutron, and some new Nick Graps mainly with the Loud House characters. I do, however, think that this roster is missing some very crucial characters for a game like this. I like that we got April and Shredder to make things more diverse, but having 2 out of the 4 Ninja Turtles just seems really weird. And come on, dog, for a game that contains all of Nick's most iconic characters fighting, where the fuck is Timmy Turner and Jimmy Neutron. Both of their series practically started a new era for Nickelodeon in the 2000s, so having them missing here is a very missed opportunity. Visually, I think this game looks really good. Well, for the most part. I say this because while some characters look fine, like with SpongeBob, some of the other characters look really off, like with Patrick looking very weird compared to SpongeBob and Sandy. And while I really do have to respect their attempt to mimic the show's original art style, Ren and Stimpy end up looking a lot like something from the Uncanny Valley. The stages themselves look really nice and have a nice variety to them. For example, you have your typical competitive stage like Jellyfish Fields, Urkin Armada, and The Dump, but the majority of stages are a lot more diverse with their designs. We have some really big stages like with Powder Toast Trouble and Omashu, and then we have stages with weird gimmicks like Space Madness and Traffic Jam. The gameplay of Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl is very simple. What you see of this game is basically what you get. It doesn't have any overarching gimmick. It's just your run-of-the-mill normal platform fighter, which on paper doesn't really sound that great because if it doesn't do anything different, then why play this game? Well, my friend, it all comes down to the execution, and the gameplay of this game is so much fun. It's really fast-paced, but not to the point where it's uncontrollable or broken. It feels fair and responsive, and for a game like this, it does a fantastic job working with its already set foundation. In terms of the game modes, we have a sports mode, which I rarely played, but it's fine for what it is. We have an arcade mode, which kind of feels more like an afterthought to add, because man, this feels really bare bones. And finally, you have an online mode, which had casual mode and competitive mode, which, yeah, the times to wait for a match are fairly long, especially if you're like me who bought the Switch version. And before you ask why, let me just say that I get to play as Garfield on the go and you go, so fuck you. And I'm not gonna lie, the few matches I did play online were fairly solid. A few lag spikes here and there, but it wasn't a constant problem.
Hey gang, it's Squill, and Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl is a dead game. But I think it's neat. Look, I know most people haven't played or thought about this game since the last DLC released, and I get it. The game is definitely lacking in single-player content and doesn't have the same polish that Smash Bros. Has. But is that really the game's fault? I mean, it's a low-budget Nickelodeon game that people hyped the hell out of as the Smash killer, which it just wasn't destined to be. No platform fighter is gonna be on the same level as Smash Bros. That's just not gonna happen. Heck, the same thing is happening to Multiversus, where the hype sort of caved in on itself and now nobody's playing it anymore. We've really got to stop comparing all of these platform fighters to Smash Bros. And just look at them on their own. And on its own, Nick All-Star Brawl is a fun time. For such a low-budget game, there's clearly so much care put into the character animations. You can really feel that the crew behind this game are huge Nickelodeon fans. The gameplay is pretty similar to Smash Bros, but it manages to stand on its own in many ways. Like the rock, paper, scissors mechanic where certain attacks cancel others out, that's really fun. As is the ability to reflect projectiles. Again, it's little things like this that make the game stand out and give it its own identity. It's far more focused on wacky and cartoony physics, which really works for a game starring a bunch of silly cartoon characters. I also love how they'll include side characters like Helga or Hugh Neutron over the main characters from their respective series. It makes the character roster feel less predictable. If I were to pick a main, it would definitely be Garfield. I already have a strong attachment to the character through his comics and memes, but I absolutely love how they adapted him into a fighting game. It almost sort of reminds me of Isabelle in Smash, where it feels like he doesn't even care about hurting you, he's just doing his regular old Garfield shenanigans that just so happen to hurt you. It's the perfect way to translate such a lazy character like Garfield into a fighting game, on top of his moveset in general just being very fun and creative. I've also gotta give a shout out to CatDog. They did such a great job creating a moveset around such an obtuse character design. Switching between which of the two you play as is just perfect. I'd like to thank Manuel for having me on here to talk about the funny Scrimblow fighting game, and I hope you all have a good one. Squill out.
Overall, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl is a pretty good game. It's a perfectly serviceable platform fighter that brings Nick characters together to fight. I had a lot of fun with it, and I recommend getting it when it's on sale because I don't think it's worth the $50 price tag. So you guys know Super Smash Flash 2, right? You know, one of humanity's greatest achievements in anything ever. Well, what if I told you that the creators of that game, McLeon Gaming, were currently working on an indie platform fighter? Fraymakers started out as a Kickstarter project back in 2020, promising to be an infinitely replayable platform fighter, promising that each character will have their own unique moveset built from the ground up, all hand animated with detailed stages, their own rollback netcode, and even creating their own game engine called Fray Tools. And now 3 years later, the game has been released under early access, and when it first came out, it was, for a lack of better words, a huge mess. But at its current state, honestly, it's pretty good, but notably still has a long way to go from being truly great. Starting off with the roster, and we already have 6 confirmed characters, but you can only play as 4. Waltaro, Commander Video, Octodad, and Arcane, with the 2 other characters, the Watcher and Ultra Finbunchen 3000, still having no concrete release date. The full roster of the game is looking to be around 10 characters, with the 4 other characters still being left in the air on who they'll actually be. And let me tell you, Shovel Knight is gonna weasel himself in there. I know that for a fact. Sure, the lack of characters is kinda underwhelming, but the amount of quality they put into the characters is still pretty impressive. While on the topic of the roster, the amount of assist characters in this game is pretty impressive. Seeing the likes of Fancy Pants, Peppino from Pizza Tower, Tank Man, and no! Visually, this game looks absolutely stunning. It has a nice sense of familiarity since it basically looks like a more updated version of Smash Flash 2, and you can literally tell with how much effort was put into each character's moves, both figuratively and literally, since most of the character animations aren't finished, but I don't mind that at all. Hell, most of the animations are already being fixed with every update we've received so far. But I really gotta commend how beautiful each of the stages look. They look very distinct and filled to the brim with detail. So like I mentioned before, this game was made by the same development team behind Super Smash Flash 2, so they already have some experience working with the genre, and Fraymakers feels as well as you expect it to. Already talked about the 4 characters included, so I might as well talk about them a little bit more. Octodad is the grappler of this game, which attacks mainly utilize grabs while also being the slowest character of the game, which is both a blessing and a curse. Orchid is the closest we have to an item maining character with his water ability, and if you played Rivals of Aether before, then you're practically at home with him. Commander Video is the rushdown character. While not having the hardest hitting character in the roster, he makes up for it by being the fastest. And finally we have Waltaro, which just like Indie Pogo, maintains the gimmick of his game, and it translates really well here. For me, each character feels really great to play as. My only nitpick though is that at times the characters feel slower than they should, but other than that, the combat's really fun. At the moment, we don't have many game modes to play with. You have local play, training mode, and custom labs where you can download mods. Extras where you can practically replay and report bugs, and an online mode, which is honestly pretty bad. In fact, it's probably my biggest problem with the game thus far. Not only does it take a pretty long time for a match to get going, but the few matches that I did end up playing were downright unplayable. The devs were aware of this issue with the rollback netcode, and they are looking to fix it. Overall, I'm optimistic about the future of Fraymakers. It's set the groundwork for a game that could be something very special in the future. Sure, their first impression wasn't exactly great, but they're slowly but surely making the best game they possibly can. And I really gotta commend them for that. Alright, time to talk about the game I spent most of my 2022 playing. Like, a lot. Multiversus is currently in its open beta, and it's being developed by Player First Games. I actually have some history with this game. I saw its initial release trailer back in late 2021, and I was really intrigued by it. Not because of its crossplay, or the roster, or how they got iconic voice actors to reprise their roles, or its gameplay, or even the fact that it was free to play. All that was pretty cool, but my main takeaway from that trailer was the fact that Adventure Time characters were going to be in a platform fighter, and that made me extremely happy. Then after a few months, I completely forgot about the game until one of my mutuals let me and a friend have an additional playtester code for the game's first tech test, and when I tell you that was the most fun me and my friends had playing a fighting game, I really mean it. In fact, that was the game that actually ended up convincing me and my friends to create our own gaming channel. So it kinda hurt when the first tech test was over, and such we were left with a Multiversus shaped hole in our hearts. Thankfully in May, they opened their closed alpha, and what was even more hype was the amazing animated trailer showing off its charm, and ending with the announcement of an open beta coming in July, which was also perfect timing since they had their own dedicated panel at Comic-Con, which gave them even more publicity. So with the amount of hype behind this game, if Warner Brothers and Player First Games played their cards right, this could have been looking to be one of the most played platform fighters ever made. And at first, it definitely was, but recently, Multiversus has been more openly criticized by the mass public. So what happened? I should preface by saying that this is a live service game. Like, at the time I was writing notes for this video, Multiversus was finishing its second season, so there is a possibility that any issues I mentioned in this segment could be fixed when the game fully drops in 2024. So with that said, let's talk about what Multiversus does right, what it does wrong, and what it could do to improve. Starting off with the current roster, and it's pretty good. I like that there's a good balance between different WB properties in terms of its characters. You got some Looney Tunes characters, DC characters, Cartoon Network characters, Hanna-Barbera characters, even some pretty off-the-wall pigs like Iron Giant and Gizmo the Shred from the Gremlins, which many people know for their iconic movies, but most of the population wouldn't think about having them in a fighting game of all things. But I appreciate how far Multiversus is willing to reach out in terms of its characters. Honestly, considering how many IPs Warner Bros. Has in their disposal, the roster for Multiversus could end up becoming a massive thing in the future. Also, one thing that I really love about the characters are their skins. They look really cool. However, that's where my problems with the game start arising. Problem number 1, unbalanced skin and prices. Now, like I mentioned at the start of this segment, Multiversus is a free-to-play live service game, so of course they gotta earn money somehow, and that's where Gleanium comes into play. To explain, Gleanium is basically this game's version of V-Bucks, but unlike V-Bucks, which you can earn by simply playing the game or earning it through the battle pass or buying them directly, Multiversus does the latter, and in hindsight, that is pretty scummy. And it doesn't help with the fact that skins themselves have some pretty unbalanced prices. For example, let's take a look at an uncommon skin, a rare skin, and a legendary skin. Here we have the President Morty skin, which has a completely different outfit as well as custom animations. He costs $5. Then we have the referee skin for Marvin, whose costume is very noticeable with no custom animations. He costs $10. And finally we have the animated series Batman skin, which has no custom animations, no custom voice lines. It's just the skin. So why the fuck is he worth $20? Now, to be fair, I can't really blame Player First Games too much for the pricing, since I'm guessing that department is mainly WB's job, but still, the pricing at times can be very absurd. But back at the positives for a second, I absolutely adore the way this game looks. Each character looks amazing, and compared to other platform fighters, I think this game does a great job transferring some of its 2D characters into 3D, and that's mainly thanks to the amazing art style of the game. The best way I could describe it is that it feels like you're fighting in a cartoon, and dog, don't even get me started on the stages. Each of them have a lot of detail and fun Easter eggs in the background, and the music of the stages are actually really damn good. As for its gameplay, that was mainly the driving force that kept me coming back to the game, and for the most part, it's still really good. The game's characters are divided into 5 categories. The Bruiser, which is this game's version of an all-rounder. The Support, which focuses on aiding your teammate, but they end up being weaker fighters. The Assassins, whose mainly focus is having fast-paced movement, but are significantly weaker than the Bruiser. On the opposite side of the spectrum, however, we have the Tanks, who are stronger but have a limit to their movement, and finally you have the Mage, who mainly focuses on projectiles. But for the combat itself, the game's driving force that makes it more unique is it practically encourages the player to play 2v2s more than typical 1v1s or free-for-alls, and that's reflected through the character's movesets. I also find it very interesting that the game doesn't really have a block button. Instead, we have a dodging feature. But by far its most unique implementation has to be the attack decay. Let's face it, we all know that one fighting game with that one character that's incredibly broken. But with Multiversus, they make sure you won't spam attacks too often, or the attack decay sign will appear on the character, meaning that if you keep spamming that same move, it will become weaker and won't have as much knockback, which is pretty smart. It encourages the player to try out its combos. As for the negatives of this gameplay, problem 2, unbalanced characters. This one's pretty self-explanatory. A lot of the characters in this game are pretty unbalanced, whether that's talking about how strong or weak the characters are, or their inconsistent hitboxes. I will give them this, however, they were actively trying to iron out hitboxes before the game went on hiatus. Unfortunately, I can't really say the same for the character balances. Here's a basic rundown of how character balancing worked in this game. There's a character that ended up being way too powerful, then a bunch of people complained about it, then they nerfed the ever-loving hell out of the character to the point they're unplayable, then people complained about that too, then they buff the character to a state that they're playable until the next patch where they make a singular change that can make them overpowered or useless, then the cycle goes back to where it started. At the current state of the game, Finn is dominating 2v2s and 1v1s, where practically everybody agrees he's the best character in the game. And then we have characters that have their significant main ability being nerfed so badly that it feels like you're already lost before starting the match. This specific problem happened in development in the last patch of the game, but Stripe has been having this issue for a while. Oh yeah, I also forgot that this game has a perk system, but honestly I forgot about them to the point that I didn't even write them in the original script. But yeah, this game has perks, and outside of some signature perks, there aren't anything special really. But going back to the gameplay, let's talk about game modes. There's 1v1, 2v2s, and free-for-all modes. There's also a dedicated training mode called the Lab, and I mean, it's a training mode, so there's not much to say there. And finally, we have an arcade mode, which is pretty bare bones all things considered, but hey, at least it somewhat has an arcade mini-boss and final boss. Even though they're just skin-swapped characters that are big, at least I have to commend their attempt. My only problem with these modes, however, is how little EXP, coins, or holiday themed rewards you can get by playing them. Actually, on that note, I want to ask you something. I knew the hype around this game started to die down around its Halloween event, but for those who were never in the community, how many of you knew that it had a Christmas-related event? Or that it had a Chinese New Year event? Or a Valentine's Day event? I'm willing to bet that not many of you didn't know. Which leads me to my biggest gripe with Multiversus and why I believe it failed to live up to the hype. Problem number 3, the lack of communication and marketing. Now, I'm willing to give credit where credit's due. Player First Game has been incredibly open to its player base around the time the game released, but then around November they just kind of stopped altogether, other than to announce the holiday events and small patches. But other than that, it's been radio silent. And I'm all for letting them keep their heads down and work on what they have to, like let them cook and shit. But remember that this is a live service game, and with no new content in the span of 2 months, that's obviously gonna make some people, especially the fanbase of the game, feel left in the dark of what to expect next. While I really wasn't a fan of how they handled their roadmap in Season 1, I can at least give them credit because they showed what to expect, but we didn't get that in Season 2. To me, it feels like Season 2 is more of a fixing internal problems holding the game back type of season, and if that's the case, then explaining that to your player base should be priority number 1. However, I'm not putting any of the blame towards Player First Games. From the tweets I've seen of people working on the game, they have nothing but love for the game and want to talk about the game, but just can't. Instead, I'm putting the blame on Warner Brothers' bare minimum attempt to market the game, because they've reached the point where I've seen this game trend more because of this game's community giving it publicity better than WB itself. But that's just what I think. Let's see what someone else has to say about the game.
Multiversus is a game that is free to play that features voice acting, which Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl lacked at launch. The developers of Multiversus clearly were given more freedom from Warner Brothers than Nick gave All-Star Brawl's team. I had the privilege of getting added to the closed beta by fellow Vibes crew member Dapper's Pad, who got selected for it. In addition to him, my friend Ramen got selected as well. Both of them invited other online mutual friends to the beta, including Manuel D, the person who invited me to be in this video, and we all had a lot of fun playing it.
I don't want to be known as that one guy who's playing with a Tasmate, bro. That's embarrassing.
Look at that, unbreakable ass tornado. Who would have thought?
I have a tornado perk too, so...
At least he's honest. At least he's honest about being full of shit.
I remember the closed beta very fondly. It was neat seeing a game that celebrated Warner Brothers history. I don't have any footage of that to show since there was an NDA. I remember there was text saying property of WB all over it. But luckily I was able to play the closed alpha, which has no NDA, and I have footage from that. The game at the time had everything I wanted from Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, a great roster of iconic characters, voice acting at launch, and dependable online, at least for me anyway. Some of my friends have experienced lag in their games they've played with me, but I had no issues myself. The game has a roster full of recognizable characters from the Warner Brothers catalog. There are Cartoon Network characters, Looney Tunes characters, and Scooby-Doo characters that need no introduction if you're an animation fan. There are also some surprise additions like Arya Stark from Game of Thrones, a HBO show targeted towards an adult audience. Oh yeah, I forgot the other 2 characters they added later on to the game from a popular Adult Swim show with a creator we don't talk about.
Rick and Morty, Rick and Morty, Rick and Morty, Rick and Morty, Rick, 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 Rick and Morty, Rick.
I found the detail of including adult franchises in this fighting game very interesting. The game was non-stop fun, and at the time I really enjoyed it. The devs of the game pushed for teamwork in Multiversus and designed the game with that element in mind. This is further explored with Bruiser, Support, Assassin, and Mage type characters, which are all great options for teamwork. Another detail I liked was that there was a level up system with each character, and there are perks you can unlock. There is also a way to unlock characters with coins you earn after each battle, which was easy with the closed alpha. However, as much as I enjoyed the game in its beta state, I slowly lost interest in the game as coins became more of a grind to get. It was really fun to play with friends, don't get me wrong, and the new additional characters look cool, but the issue was the grind to get coins prevented me from unlocking the characters. Honestly, looking back, having it free to play in my opinion was a mistake on WB's part, since something as simple as DLC would be a great way to profit while having a decent base roster. However, WB Games decided to go the Fortnite approach with a battle pass for cosmetics. Things like skins and announcer voices that were earnable in the closed beta ended up costing Lemium, which was a big letdown for me, but it's expected given this game was free to play. By was free to play, I mean that the game is not playable at the moment, at least online. The game's developers ended up deciding to make the game no longer playable till 2024, unfortunately. It went offline in June 2023, and fans in the Discord, as you can see, did not take it well. Hopefully, when the game returns, it will be fun again, and the grind for coins will be more easy. I honestly lost interest in the game, but I hope it gets better once it comes back. Thanks, Manuel D, for letting me be in this video. Also, Walter White needs to be in Multiversus. Put him in the game. Bye.
Overall, I have a lot more to say about this game, but I'm not going to because of time reasons. In all honesty, this entire segment could have been its own video if I wanted it to. We haven't received too many news of this game since it went on hiatus, but hopefully it managed to blow the beta out of the water and a lot of the issues I mentioned before. This game has tons of untapped potential, and it would really suck for it to fumble. I love this game with all my heart, but they really gotta step up their game. Also, fuck you if you're a Superman main. I just came out of the Multiversus thing. My throat is gonna fucking kill itself at some point, and I really do not feel like recording Divine Knockout. So here's my buddy Dylan. He's gonna talk about the game. Alright, I'll see you guys when I talk about the final game, I guess.
So here's a question you probably never thought of before. Have you ever wanted to play a free platform fighter where you run around and beat each other up as gods from different mythologies and pantheons? No? Well, too bad, because that's what Divine Knockout, or DKO for short, is set out to do. And just like Multiversus, this game is still in its beta, and is also a live service game, meaning that my opinions are subject to change within the official release of this game. DKO is being developed by Hi-Rez Studios, who you might know for creating games like Smite. I was lucky enough to actually play this game during its closed beta, and I found myself actually enjoying this game quite a bit. So let's see if it was real enjoyment or if it isn't as good as I remember. Starting off with this roster, and like I just mentioned, the game has you playing as gods from different mythologies and pantheons, and so far, I really like the diversity of the roster, and not just design-wise, but mythology-wise too. Having a nice mix between Norse mythology, Greek mythology, and even Japanese mythology. Just like Brawlhalla, each of the gods will undergo a free rotation system, and new gods can be unlocked by leveling up the gods you have, and thankfully, leveling up is actually pretty simple, and it doesn't force you to grind up hours playing, which is something that will entice newcomers to play the game. I am very split on the game's visuals, and not because I think that they're ugly, because objectively I think this game is very visually appealing, especially when it comes to the creativity of the stage design. My personal favourite is probably the library stage though, that might just be because of its great use of the purple lighting. My issue is with the overall chibi art style the game is going for. I know that this is mainly a personal issue because I know a lot of people like this art style, and like I said before, objectively it gets the job done, but I don't know, that's just me. Now let's get on to the really meaty stuff. The gameplay. Unlike any other platform fighter I've talked about in this video, this game distincts itself by being one of the first 3D platform fighters ever made, if we aren't counting Shrek Super Slam. But how does it handle this aspect? Well, I'm happy to report that it's pretty fun. Each character has a light and heavy attack, as well as a special ability and an ultimate attack, and in order to take them out, you have to make them fall off the stage or throw them really far off the stage, and the combat more than complements this by being fast-paced, but also really sharp and precise. But what really surprised me is the amount of game modes this game has. The game modes vary from battling your opponents to capture the flag, or collecting coins, which keeps the game fresh. And that's really it. Divine Knockout is a pretty fun game that does something new for the genre, so if you want to try it out, I'd say go for it. It's a shame that the game ended up being forgotten after a month though, and from the way things are looking, I wouldn't be surprised if it's shut down by later this year or next year.
I was going to end this video by talking about DKO, but during the research phase of this video, I came across this small platform fighter and I knew that I had to at least give it a mention. The game I'm talking about is called Toon All-Star Slam, a free platform fighter created by CalcoBeater. As of right now, the game is still in its very early stages of development, and even then I can tell you that this game has a ton of passion and love poured into it. Plus, it has some insane potential of being something incredible in the future. Each character is unique visually and gameplay-wise. Even some characters like SpongeBob and Grim, who you might expect them to just copy their moveset from their big platform fighter counterparts, but they don't do that. Sure, they have some moves inspired by them, but for the most part, the rest of their moves are actually inspired by other popular media they're in. I also really like how varied each stage is, as well as the music for each stage being unironically a banger. So with this, the amount of future content on the way, and a very open dev team working on this game, the future of Toon All-Star Slam is looking very bright, so go check this game out. The link of the game will be in the description down below, as well as the link to my interview that I did with creators. It's a really interesting watch. And that's every game I'll be talking about today. Like I said in the start of the video, I'm pretty sure I missed on other platform fighters, but it is what it is, I suppose. Anyways, I think the best way to wrap up this video is ranking all these games from worst to best. Oh yeah, and I didn't put Toon All-Star Slam in this ranking since I didn't think it seemed fair. But if I did put it, I'd probably put it above Brawlhalla but below Fraymakers. Alright, now let's get into ranking. Starting in dead last at number 11, Kung Fu Panda Showdown of Legendary Legends. This is quite possibly the most bland fighting game I've ever played. Outside of the music maybe, everything else about this game is boring. Number 10, TMNT Smash Up. While it arguably has worse gameplay than Legendary Legends, unlike that game, this game has better visuals and more content. Other than that, this game kinda sucks too. Number 9, PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. Putting my nostalgic bias aside, while it does have some really great ideas, it doesn't execute them that well. Number 8, Cartoon Network Punch Time Explosion. My critiques about PlayStation All-Stars basically applies to this game, except this game has worse graphics but a somewhat competent story mode. Number 7, Brawlhalla. While I really like the art style and I appreciate how accessible this game is, it does take a while to get used to the controls and combat, which could turn some people off away from this game. Number 6, Fraymakers. It definitely has the foundation to be an incredible platform fighter thanks to its stunning visuals and fun gameplay, but its lack of mode and characters is definitely what hold the game back as of now. Number 5, Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl. The gameplay is definitely what keeps this game from being as high as it is on the list, the visuals can range from being great to mid, and the lack of content within its additional modes does suck. Number 4, Divine Knockout. I adore the gameplay and respect it for doing something new for the genre. The only thing I don't like about this game is its general art style or the fact that it hasn't had a true new update in months. Number 3, Multiversus. The gameplay and visuals are great with each character feeling unique. The only negative factor is that it's a beta and it's free to play, meaning that it has a lot of issues that plague other live service games. Even with all my issues aside, I do think it can redeem itself when it properly releases next year. Number 2, Rivals of Aether. The game that comes to mind when people think of platform fighters instead of Smash, and there's a clear reason why. There's incredible visuals, great gameplay, fun game modes, and a weird yet incredible modding scene. It's the whole package. But there is one game I think beats Rivals of Aether as my favorite platform fighter, and that would be number 1, Indie Pogo. It adds a fun spin to the platform fighting genre and makes it work almost perfectly. The gameplay is the most fun I've had playing a fighting game, it looks amazing, the stages are diverse, and the other game modes are also really fun. Seriously, go check this game out if you haven't. Also, Lowbro Studios, if you're watching this, please give me info regarding the Switch port, or if you're down for an interview, please let me know. I'd be so down for that. Well, this video took longer than expected to both make and release. Like, this video was originally going to drop in March, and now we're in December. But after multiple rewrites, revisions, and delays, I finally managed to get this video out. I don't really have a funny remark to make at the end of this video, so, follow me on Twitter, join my new Discord server that I made with my buddy Geek. I want to try and keep that shit somewhat alive. And donate to my Kofi if you want. Anyway, this has been Manuel D, and I'm gonna go enjoy Spider-Man 2. I know this has absolutely nothing to do with the topic of the video, but at this point, I don't fucking care. I'm just glad I got this shit done.